I ended up shouting at Cedric once when I didn't realize this. So I could hear Cedric speaking to his family and hello, hello, are we live? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our latest workshop. Can you hear me, Eric?
Yeah, so we'll just keep doing some sound check and stuff, just so to give everyone else a chance to join, because we're not quite on the hour yet.
Oh, we're early today. That's a first.
So just while we're waiting, someone tweeted yesterday, and I thought it was quite funny. So well, it could be a bad joke, could be a dad joke for all we know. But question is, why don't Hollywood make big data movies? And the answer is, it has no sequel. Get it? No CQL?
I got it.
I thought that was quite clever.
I think the question alone is already quite funny, right? After the big data songs, we could make some big data movies.
That was my dad joke for the day.
That's fine. So we're ready to go, or what? Should we get started?
Let's just give it a few minutes. Let's just ask if anyone can do thumbs up. If you guys can do thumbs up, if you can hear us before we get started.
I'm all at the mercy of Eric because I can't see the thumbs up.
Now, Big Craig, the instruction was, can you do a big thumbs up for us?
What did he put?
He goes, hi, dudes, can hear you.
Oh, we have our Australia audience back. That's awesome. We're back at this early time slot in the day, and it's wonderful to hear and see some familiar names. Welcome. We're ready to go? Excellent.
Let's go.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining us today. And we're going to do a hands-on workshop with CRUD operations with Node.js and Python, not at the same time, but using DataStax Astra. And we all hope that you're ready to code along. So this is very much hands-on. It's a short presentation, but it's a lot of hands-on material, and we would like you to do it with us at the same time. That would be wonderful. With me is Eric. Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so happy to be back at the early slot and have you there.
I know, exciting to be here, Bettina. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Based in Melbourne, so still in full lockdown for another 2 months. Anyone else in Melbourne? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're from Melbourne? I'm guessing no.
Well, you have to bring your friends next time. So
yeah.
good. Good. Right in the background, we've got a few others supporting us as usual. So we've got the helping hands on Discord. We've got Cedric, who's actually hosting for us. You know, he's the master of the streams today. And we've got usually a few volunteers from the wider DataStax family who are answering questions on Discord and on YouTube chat. So don't hold back, right? We want to understand your questions, and we have plenty of time today for questions. So let us know what's on your mind. We're streaming on YouTube and on Twitch, but we will not look at the chat in Twitch, right? So only YouTube chat, questions on Discord. If you have more difficult questions like with Markdown, etc., so it's easier to do them on Discord than on YouTube, and they persist. We see them later. We can go through the questions later on again. We will be using Astra today, so if you don't have an account yet, you have plenty of time to get that set up. The UI has changed if you used Astra before, so you might actually be in for a pleasant surprise. So nice it is to work. And we will be doing our quizzes. You know, those who've been to our workshops before, this is really nice. So first we'll do a survey to understand a little bit our setup of the audience and who we're dealing with today. It's really interactive. And later on, we will have a quiz sort of covering some of the topics that we covered in the workshop. Hopefully not too difficult, and you have a chance of winning some prizes. So the top 3 in the quiz will get some DataStax branded swag, and it's usually very, very well received. So we hope that you join us for that. And we do something a little bit different today as well for questions. Let me just see whether I can get to the right slide here. This is a new app that we're trying out for gathering questions, and it's actually really nice because you can upvote questions that other people are asking. And for me and for Eric, us as presenters, it's much easier to sort of follow the questions on if we keep them outside of the YouTube chat, especially. So try this one out. You can put your questions in anonymously, or you can identify yourself with a name. And then we will have regular stops in the presentation where we look through these questions and answer, you know, a couple of them as time permits. So I would encourage you to try this one out as well. Okay, good. Let's get going. So today is coding. Please code along with us, right? You need a little bit of experience with Node or Python, so you can choose, right? You don't have to, it's not a mixed app. There was a question yesterday. It's not, we don't mix Python and Node code. But we have 2 tracks basically in the GitHub repo, one entirely for Node, one entirely for Python. But they are, in terms of driver code, fairly similar, right? So it actually makes sense to sort of like cover them both. It's very similar how they're working and how they're set up, and you choose either of them. The exercises are identical for Node or for Python, and we probably present the Python side today. Yesterday we had a lot more Python developers on the call, so you know, we stay with Python probably today. You don't have to install anything. We will be using Gitpod. So Gitpod is basically plugged into GitHub. You can launch it straight from GitHub. You would need a GitHub account to do that. So if you don't have one yet, go and set one up. It's free, it's easy to do. And you do not have to install anything. Gitpod gives you a full online IDE. I think it's actually really fabulous what it can give. And I can show you a little bit how that looks like. So this is the Gitpod IDE that I'm getting. And you see I have all the code here, and I can select the files and everything. So, and I can modify and run it. It's pretty good. So we're using that today. And so all you need is a browser, right? A good internet connection, admittedly, but you have that because you're seeing us. And then you can just get going and code along with us. So we give you time to set that up. So, okay. So we will be working with Astra, which is the database in the cloud for you. Again, you don't need to install anything. It gives you Cassandra as a service in the cloud. You can claim your instance here. There's a free tier, and you do not need a credit card. There's no time limit. You just need to sign up with your email address. And I believe this is the correct barcode to take you to this link and get set up. And then we will be using really the GitHub repository. And this is up there for your reference. So you can go back later. It should have the slides. It should have all the instructions to do it at your own leisure. But I think it would be wonderful if you did it along with us, right? So we've got plenty of time. There's no need to race through this and be experimental, be creative, try to do something and see whether you can use it as a starting board for your own development with Astra. It would be absolutely wonderful. Good. Okay. So unless there's any feedback on bad audio or etc., Eric, should we get started with Menti and see?
Yeah, let's dance.
Today. Okay, good. So Menti, let me just find it here. Let me just present it. So Menti, if you haven't used it before, you go to menti.com, right, and put in this code 7348058, or you can just scan this barcode. So, and this should take you to the right web page. And then we recommend that you just stay on the phone, right? Or if you've used it on the browser, just stay on that page. Don't watch us on YouTube during that time because there's a delay, right? It's not so critical for this initial survey, but it's more critical when we do our quiz because you want to be fast. And so if you give us a thumbs up, and I don't know how many people are watching, so I don't know how many people I should be waiting for before we actually start the survey.
We've got about 30 at the moment.
Okay. Right. Okay. So then let's see whether I can get at least half people joining us on Menti. And currently I see about 5 people. That would make very sparse readings of the survey. So let's see. 8 so far. Don't want to delay it too much.
It's a good time to practice now. If you haven't done Menti before on your mobile, just from a Chrome browser or whatever on your mobile, just go to menti.com and just follow us with the quiz. Because when we do the proper quiz later on where you win prizes, you kind of need to be familiar with it.
Actually, if you only have 10 people, everybody will be on the leaderboard later.
Well, there you go.
You have a very good chance today to win prizes, right? Cool. Okay, so I move on. How much experience do you have with Apache, Cassandra? We just like to know approximately where you're starting off. And more than 5 years. My God, who's that? It must be you, Eric. So never used it. That's wonderful. And less than 1 year. That's wonderful. That's great. That's really we really want to encourage people using it.
That's what we wanted.
See that it's not that hard. It's not that hard to get started with it. So.
That's what we wanted to see. We want people who have who are new to Cassandra or have never used it before to be joining these workshops.
That's wonderful. Welcome. But these experienced people, I encourage you to answer questions as they come along. So that's cool. Cool, perfect. And what's your preferred coding language? I mean, today it's for Python and Node, but we have a lot of courses about Java, but it's also interesting whether we have some languages that we do not cover at all, right? And whether there's any interest in them. Okay, so we can really safely stay with the Python track today. That sounds good. Today is no Java, but we have done a few workshops in the past, and next week, Wednesday and Thursday, we do Spring Reactive. Okay, so if you have another, if you just put it into
JavaScript
the
developers
chat.
out there?
Sorry?
Go on. I was asking if there's any Node or JavaScript developers out there. We got one.
Yeah,
good.
It's pretty. I mean, often we see a much bigger share, but yeah, today it's a Python. It's Python play. If you have ticked the other, then let us know in the chats what it is, right? So in case in case there's something that we're missing. But yeah, so that's interesting. So C#, we get that call occasionally, or actually quite frequently, that we should probably do something with C#. So we should look into that. So we haven't done that yet. one go. I was hoping to see something like that. That's awesome. Cool.
Yep, here we go.
Have you been to any of our workshops before? I got that, Eric. Yes, okay, that's wonderful. So yes, oh my God, there's a lot of returners. Thank you so much. That's cool. Oh,
Just too old, Craig.
Good, even split here, right? But you're all welcome. We're so delighted to see new people, and it's also wonderful to have you come back to our workshops because we've grown into this family over the summer. We have had such an intense summer of workshops, and we've built up really good relationships with our users. It's wonderful to do that. And how did you hear about it? Even those, who come back to us, how do you know about the new events at the moment? Eventbrite. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming up in the next few weeks. We have a ton of workshops lined up. I think we do about 3 or 4 per week at the moment. So you can hear about this video on Eventbrite. That's probably a really good source of new information. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, right? Also, and obviously all these other channels. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm really interested about the people who get stuff from Instagram because we keep getting asked about it. And so I'm kind of interested if you could make a comment in the chat to say, was it an ad? Was it someone else's post that you saw on Instagram? Because I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so am I. I didn't think it was a channel really for promoting it that well, but that's cool. Yeah, let us know. That's quite interesting for us. And then what you want to do with your knowledge. So it's always interesting to see whether you've got any concrete plans already. I mean, I'm really looking at this here. So, if you like to build an app, or if you started building an app, tell your story to us, right? Share your GitHub repos. Tell us what you're doing with it. Perhaps we can work together. We can somehow promote it, what you're doing, or we can, do some events together. We would really like to hear those user stories. They really bring the technology to life. And it's wonderful to hear about them. Cool. Perfect.
Yeah, so if you're building an app, let us know, whether it's on, reach out to us on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever. Let us know, and we're quite happy to, talk to you about it. We want to hear from you. Maybe we even get to interview you in one of our future sessions. So, 10, 15-minute interview and have a chat about your app.
Exactly. And actually, we were giving out vouchers for certifications, and we tie them now. We will ask you to submit a repo, just show us some use. We come back to this later. So that's perfect. If you build a small app or something like this, stick it in there, and that's a great way of us knowing about it and about your efforts, how you're learning, exploring this tech. Okay, so keep the Menti open. We come back to it. Later on, it will be a little bit more hectic, right? Because we've asked you questions, we want you to answer them very fast, and there will be a leaderboard. So keep it open in the background, and let's get going with the presentation. So we're building a little app today, or the data model for a simple use case, and it's a bit contrived, right? It's but it sort of highlights a couple of interesting things that you might come across in your own app development. Basically, we're not building the UI today, so we're building the backend for it, and also it's just a simple example. But the motivation is that we are building a catalog of spacecraft journeys, right? So we have spacecrafts with their names, and they go on their individual journeys. Those journeys will have their individual ID, and we have a catalog that lists all the spacecraft journeys. And then we have the meter readings, the telemetry for those journeys, right? Pressure over time, location over time, temperature, and speed, right? So there will be, when you go on a journey, you will broadcast you will publish your telemetry data, and we will save it into Astra, and then we can go back into it and read it, right? So this is basically the very simple app that we're building today. And there's a couple of interesting aspects in it. But when we talk about building a data model for Cassandra, it is very, very important to think about it first, what you actually want to get out of the database, right? And there's a formal process about how best to create this data model. And basically it takes the conceptual data model into account, what entities do I have, what are my attributes, what are my keys, and then it also considers the application workflow, and this is very important, right? Because with Cassandra, we basically want to know our queries first, and we want to construct our tables in such a way that we can serve queries, ideally with just one read, right? Or with just one write. So we want to lay out the table that we can just go into Cassandra and pull everything in one swoosh. And so that's why we will go through this process a little bit and understand really what does the query want from us and how do we need to lay out the tables to achieve that. And that makes Cassandra very, very fast in reading. And that's no difference for Astra. So it's Astra is full Cassandra in the cloud for you. And it's really important. It's good. It's useful to know these kind of concepts. So this is the conceptual data model. As I said, we will be collecting journeys, right? And they are for spacecrafts, right? So this will go into the key, and they will have a specific ID, right? So in order to make them uniquely identifiable. But we also have some additional data in there, right? First of all, we have the summary of the journey. What is this about? Where are we going? And then, is it an active journey or has it already completed? When did it start and when did it end, right? And then we want to decode the telemetry data. And these tables will be very, very similar, right? So we will have the readings of the speed, of the temperature, of the pressure, and the location. And we will store them into separate tables, ideally, And it depends how we want to read that. And we will have the unit, right? So we know how this measurement is expressed, at what time we took the measurement, and then basically the measurement itself. That should say speed here. Okay, and then the application workflow. So let's think about what we want to get out of our app, right? We want to be able to catalog all the queries, look up all the journeys for the spacecraft, right? So for any spacecraft, we want to be able to get to all the journeys. We want to see the whole catalog. We want to look up all the individual journeys that a spacecraft has taken. We want to look at the state of a journey. So we want to query, the details of that journey. And of course, we want to create new journeys, right? And, add to that catalog. Then for the readings, we're interested in speed, pressure, temperature, and location. We want to potentially plot them over time, right? So how did it go up and down, etc. So we want to see the readings over time. We want to be able to display each dimension independently, for example, on a chart, right, like this, or you will map different readings that you have in your dashboard. We want to be able to analyze the data for a complete journey. And we're saying here we're recording less than 100,000 records per journey per dimension. That's our estimation, what we need. And that kind of feeds a little bit into how big can the table get or how big can the partitions get. Do we need to make some allowances for that? And in this case, if we stay with less than 100,000 record, as a rule of thumb, that's fine to put it all into the same partition. It's going to be the application workflow, and from that, we're going to construct our data model now. So this means we're going to split it into a number of tables. So I think let's get them out here. We have the spacecraft journey catalog table, which is basically our entry point into this app, right? And there we will have the spacecraft name as a key, right? And then we will give some additional uniqueness to the rows that we're storing in there by using journey ID, right? A unique ID for the journey. So our spacecraft can go on to several journeys. It can go to the moon and to Mars and to Venus and whatever. And we keep those records separate. This notation, you might not be used to it if you haven't been to any of our previous workshops about Cassandra introduction. This is the notation that we use to basically just pull our thinking into, articulate our needs and pull them into the data model that we need for Cassandra, the physical model. The K denotes the key. This will be our key, right? This is the partitioning. This is how we want to partition. So we want to keep all the spacecraft journeys for one spacecraft in one partition. And the clustering key, the C denotes a clustering key. This has two functions. It provides it provides uniqueness, right? So we can really keep those journeys separate, but it also allows to order. And so we can sort of decide what order we want to have within the partition. So in this case, we decide we want to have it sorted by time and descending. So we see the most frequent journey, the most recent journey first, right? And we will talk a little bit how we achieve that here. Now, if you look at the telemetry data, we need to key it with the spacecraft name, right? It belongs to that spacecraft. And we also want to key it with the journey ID because it belongs to that journey, right? So those two things together will make a partition key. We put them all together into one partition. And then again, we want to see the progression over time. So we want to be able to sort on time, right? Either ascending or descending. In this case, we're going for descending. And so that's the symbol here for that we're using this as a clustering key. So this achieves a couple of things, right? So this, first of all, spacecraft name and journey ID, this means it all goes into the same partition. So we could get everything out in one swoosh if we just want to get for that journey and for that spacecraft. And the reading time is also the unique record. It achieves the uniqueness, right? It's the unique record for each reading. So if we have 100,000 measurements of speed over time, we will get 100,000. And this also ensures the ordering. So we do not have to make any client-side ordering. We just get it immediately in the order that we want to have right out of the database. And the other ones are pretty much the same. The only one that's has a little bit more complexity in there is the location, and I'll come to that in a moment, because there we will be using a special type. So we come from the logical data model to the physical data model, where we actually start talking about types, right? And because this is a structured database, and the columns have allocated types. So spacecraft name is just the text type, right? It's varchars, it's a string. Then we use a really convenient type here that you might or might not have seen before. This is a time UUID. It's a UUID that also can be resolved to a timestamp, right? So it has the timestamp encoded within the UUID. And that basically gives us the ability to sort by time, right? We have it by time, but we also have the uniqueness here. It's a concept that's used very, very frequently in Cassandra. UUIDs are used very frequently, and the time UUIDs as well. So it's something that's really handy, and we will be using it today. There's tools in the driver and also in the database, in the SQL language of the database, to generate those. So you do not have to do a lot of things in order to generate those. We will use timestamps, Boolean, text, right? I think that's all pretty standard. But let's have a look a little bit in, first, let's see how that actually then translates to SQL, right? So if it looks pretty straightforward, I think the one thing that you might not know perhaps is that how you specify the primary key. So each table in Cassandra needs to have a primary key, and within the primary key, we always need to have a partition key, right? Here we've denoted this with extra brackets, that this is a partition key. I think if you see no brackets here, then it just means that the first element is the partition key of that, right? And then here, this is denotes specifically the clustering order. So we are sorting by journey ID in a descending manner. And because this is time UUIDs, this will be sorted by time.
And just for those who are quite new to Cassandra, so this is quite important. So the primary key here is in Cassandra, tables are not just two-dimensional. In fact, in Cassandra, when you have clustering keys, you end up with a multi-dimensional table. In relational terms, where you've only got one column in the primary key, which means that it's the partition key. Each partition is a record in the Cassandra database. But when you've got this situation where you've got a partition key plus a clustering column, each partition is still a record, but each of the clustering columns becomes rows within that same partition, which is why it becomes multidimensional.
Exactly. Thanks very much, Eric. Yeah, so if I'm a little bit too fast with these concepts, we have fully 2-hour workshops dedicated entirely to these concepts. So it might make sense to go in for the introduction to Cassandra if you haven't taken that yet. So we did this actually quite frequently in the last few weeks. So there should be 3 or 4 workshops recorded, and we have all the materials in GitHub as well. So if you want to dig a little bit more into this and really understand what is behind all this partitioning and this composition of the primary key, then ask us the question now, and we can direct you to the right resources. Okay. Now, this is the one that I wanted to focus a little bit more into because it actually comes up very frequently that our developers want to do something with user-defined types, right? So this is a UDT, is a user-defined type, and here we are basically composing our location out of 3 coordinates, right? So we have the X, Y, Z coordinate, and if we want to use this kind of concepts, we have to create the type first before we can use it within our table. And in this case, this is the right thing. So we're creating the type first, and then we actually use the type here, right? And in this case, we've chosen to use it with the keyword frozen, which means we will always expect a complete type, right? So this is so you cannot just go in and update the X coordinate or the Y coordinate. We always expect that you're updating X, Y, and Z together, and you're also reading X, Y, and Z together. And that kind of makes sense because that is a complete location that we're interested in. I thought it might be worth introducing this today, and also because to understand how to work with it in the code, right? Because that can sometimes it's a little bit more of an advanced concept with how to work with drivers. It's not really difficult, but it's just something that we've seen quite a few questions about. At the same time, I would like to don't overdo it with UDTs, right? Do not create a database within your database because you like this kind of, an extra structure. There are also limitations with it, how useful it can be, right? So you could as well just have the 3 coordinates separately here, right? And that might just do the trick for you. So don't overcomplicate it. I think especially when you get started with development with Cassandra, we've seen quite a few questions, haven't we, Eric, that very new developers with Cassandra, they get really quite hung up about UDTs, and that causes sometimes some unexpected behavior or extra complexity that you could do without. So
yeah, so what we normally see is that there's a lot of new developers, for example, they think, oh, I'll create a database within a database, or I'll create a table within a table, meaning that instead of using just native SQL types, such as a text or an integer or a timestamp, time UUID, they create this super complex type of their own that really they're embedding a table inside another table by creating that type. Like they're storing lots of data within one column, because really that's what a UDT is. It's one column in the table, except that it contains lots of elements in it, like a collection, for example.
Exactly. And then you can sort of think about, how you want to update it, that you probably have to delete it first in order to update the full new state that you want to have. So as I said, there are some complexities that you're exposing yourself to, and you might want to think about it, whether it's really worth it. But it's worth sort of like covering a little bit today and show you how to deal with it in the code. Okay, so let's get started, right? So the first thing we want to do with you is that we want you to be set up on Astra and ready to go, right? So if you haven't used Astra so far, it is Cassandra as a service in the cloud provided by DataStax. And it is really there to give you global scale at the push of a button, really, without any operations, without any need to install anything, and just have it available for you. And there's a very generous free tier. So it hasn't got an expiration, there isn't a trial period. It has 5 gig of storage, and you do not need to enter a credit card or anything when you get set up. It's just your name and email address, and then you should be able to use it. So if you're new to it, just sign up here. If you already have an Astra database, you can add a new key space, and we can show you how to do that. And take note of the username, password, key space that you're using, because you need to update those things in the code in order to connect correctly. We will be using these kind of defaults here, and we've written the code to use those things, but there's only one place in each track for Python and for Node where you would have to update them. So it's really totally unnecessary that you stick to those. It's really up to you. Okay, so let's get started with that. So, and I show you how this, oops, it's here. Let's get out of the Minty here. And I show you. So first of all, this is the GitHub repo. I hope you can read it. Is it big enough? Let me just make it a bit bigger.
Me too. Yeah, to zoom in a bit.
A little bit more. Okay, that's probably hopefully good. And so CRUD operations, NodeJS, and Python. So you have all the links here. And let's set up the database, right? So you would sign up with an email. You can sign up with a Google account or with GitHub even. And that should get you to a summary page. And it should look a little bit like this when you signed up. So now we want to add a database, right? So I can either go here in the left-hand column, add a database, or there's a button here on the right side. So whatever, I'm going for this one. So you want to make sure that you tick the free tier, right? So this is what I want to go with. Then I think it needs to be, it used to be only Google Cloud. Can I stick? No, I think for the free tier, it's only Google Cloud. And then you want to make sure that you want to select your region. So I think unless you are in the US, I think most people who would join us at this time of the day are probably best with your best. But you can just try it out and see what works best for you. And then you can click the configure button. You might not see that. I'm not sure whether it's behind Eric or myself. So it's in the lower right-hand corner is the configure button there. And then you can configure your database. Right, so my Astra cluster, my key space name, I call it Spacecraft. My database username, Spacecraft user. My password, Spacecraft password. Oh, I must make sure that I don't make a mistake here. So, and you need to have a number or a special character in your password now. And you can hopefully type it again correctly. And then, see, I always have problems when I type password. So that should hopefully, still not, that should be fine. Okay.
So follow us along now. It's a good time to create your own database.
Follow us along.
Exactly. Later on.
And you see what's happening here. So it's pending, right? It's in a pending state. That should really only take a couple of minutes, and then you will see that the database is created, and it should switch to active.
So while we're waiting for that, so is anyone having any issues creating an Astra database? Just let us know in the chat.
Yeah, or in
either
the
on the YouTube chat or on Discord.
I don't see any questions there yet, so but if you have anything. It's active. There you go. And then give us thumbs up when it's active for you, so we know a little bit whether it's going fine.
So Reza said that doesn't do anything when it clicks configure. Did you click on?
I have not created, might have not chosen your region. Did you choose your region? You need to explicitly choose a region. So the three things you need to choose basically. It's the free tier, it's the cloud. So you go for GCP cloud. I think that's the only options available. I actually thought it was pre-selected, but it wasn't just now. And then you need to pick a region, right? And then you can configure.
Naveen, what doesn't it allow you to do? Which bit are you stuck on?
So if you already have a free tier database, then you won't be able to create a new one. So you could perhaps be stuck on this, right? So then just use the one that you already have. That's fine. If you don't have a free tier, you'll be able to just select free and then select a cloud provider here and then select a region, which I can't do again because I have one already.
Right. So if you've attended our workshops previously, then you'll already have a database running, so that's fine.
And if you want to add another key space to the database, you would basically just go into, you select your cluster, your database from the databases tab here on the side. And then you have this, in the bottom of the screen, you have this ability to add a new key space. There's a button on the right-hand side of that screen, and then you can add a new key space. So I can just do a test here. And I'm not doing it now because it takes a couple of minutes again to set up this key space. But this would be one way if you wanted to keep the data separate. Yeah, you could definitely try that. Good. So the next thing we want to do is that we want to actually put our data model into the database, right? So this is, we want to create the schema in the database. We will not be doing this through the code today. We can totally do this programmatically. However, if you have a large cluster, with a lot of nodes, and I do not recommend that you create your schema programmatically. So it can cause some issues. So I personally always think you should create it through CQL, and you should not just create new tables and delete them and drop them and create new key spaces and drop them, because these are schema changes. And when you're dealing with a distributed database, you do not want this continuous synchronization on schema, right? So the schema has to be migrated to all of the other nodes. And it's something that, you should just, this takes a little bit of time and it takes a little bit of work. And it's something that is really not something that you should do all the time, every minute or every hour. It's more of a, it's better to consider it as this is a clear maintenance task that you, in order to set up your databases and your tables. And personally, I think it's best to do it through the Sql Console. I don't know, Eric, whether you have a different opinion on that, but
yeah, no, that's perfect.
Good. So if you want to get to the Sql Console, you can just choose it here in the top. Once your database is active, you should it now just signs you in. This is actually different in the README because this is a new change from yesterday that you do not need to put your password in here anymore, right? So it just signs you in. It knows you are the user, you're using this, so it has signed me in as user here, and for this database.
Could you zoom in a little bit, Bettina,
yeah,
please?
and it's saying it's actually calling me token at CQLSH, so I think we might want to actually bring that up, that it should really say as user. That's how I signed in there. Okay, so and now we can use our key space, right? So my key space was Spacecraft. You want to finish all your SQL commands with a semicolon, and just hit enter. And now we are in the Spacecraft key space, and we can see what tables we have so far. There's my tables. Nothing is set up here, right? So we want to copy this really out of the README. So if we go to step 1E, connect via Sql Console. As I said, this is actually out of date already, so it should be very simple to connect just by clicking onto this console button. But now we use Spacecraft, and now we want to copy all our schema in there, all our DDL here. So, and it's set up in such a way that it's key space agnostic, because you might have a different key space. But before you copy it in, you want to make sure that you are in your right key space, because otherwise you will get an exception there. I don't know where to put these types and tables, basically. So you can just...
So I pasted the link to the workshop instructions just so you can follow along.
Yeah, so you want to be on that GitHub repo, right? Have a look at the workshop instructions. It's in step 1F, create a schema, make sure you navigate to the right key space, right? And then you just copy this, copy this out, and you can just paste it in there. And this sets up with a table. So if I have a look at the tables now, I see my tables. I can actually do the same for describe types. And I see my one specific user-defined type, the location that I've set up there. I can also go and describe those things in more detail. I can do describe table, and I give it a table name. So we can look at the spacecraft journey, for example, this journey catalog. And then you see here, this is the table that we set up. And oh, it actually has a custom kind of ascending. I thought you wanted to set it up for descending. That's fine now. I must have forgotten that when I set it up in the schema. And this has additional table options. They're just default. You can just leave them as that unless you're a very advanced user. There's absolutely no need to modify them. Okay, good. So we're all good to go. Eric, do you get any feedback? Who's coding?
Yeah, we're going all right at the moment.
Okay. And
just let us know if you have any questions or we'll stop.
Do you have any feedback whether the setup is complete and whether we actually have some coders coming with us?
Yeah, there's a couple. Reese just asked before, but just didn't wait long enough for the database to launch completely before logging onto the CQLSH console. So we're okay now.
Okay, perfect. Good. All right, so I think we might just move on. So we've copied the schema from GitHub and pasted it in the Sql Console, so we can just move on. So now we will look at the connection to Astra, right? So in order to connect to Astra, we need a driver, and there's no special Astra driver, right? We will just use the standard DataStax drivers for that, and today we're going to use the Python and the Node drivers. There are drivers in lots of different languages, and they've all been updated for the ability to connect with Astra. And even those community drivers that we don't support from the DataStax end, for example, the Go driver, Erick, for example, actually worked with a community user to enable the connection to Astra. So it's there's no magic in there. It's just a Cassandra driver that we're using. All the Cassandra drivers, you don't need to go into this whole print today. We just wanted to highlight that these are actually quite sophisticated drivers that are really aware of the challenges that a distributed database can bring, and they're totally optimized to handle those. So they know, about how to be aware of where the data is located, how to balance the load, how to retry if necessary, or reconnect or pull the connections, feedback about the health of the cluster. So there's actually a lot of detail in these drivers. There's a lot of support for building queries and for parsing. So we will only really scratch the surface of these abilities today. But yeah, you can dive into this. There's a lot of documentation as well, and we want to see your efforts, right? So if you run into, if you're successful doing something a little bit more advanced, or if you run into issues, let us know. Today, it's very simple to install. That's the one thing that we might want you to do in Gitpod, to install the drivers, right? So, but it's, just use the package managers, npm install Cassandra driver or pip install Cassandra driver, and you're good to go, right? That pulls the latest, and that's a good version to use. We'll do that in a moment. And then we set up the connection with Astra. So there's something a little bit special about connecting with Astra, and that's the concept of the secure connect bundle. And I'll show you in a moment where to get it from and how an easy way to get it in the Gitpod. But this is basically a bundle that it's a zip file that basically has all your credential files together for you, and you do not have to create this or assemble it yourself, and you do not have to pick it apart. So the driver knows how to pick it apart, basically how to pull out the various elements it needs in order to secure that connection and establish it. And then we just have to give the username and the password on top of it in order to establish that connection. And it's very similar in Python. So again, we just point it to the secure bundle, and we provide the username and the password in order to connect. So we do that in a moment. But I think the key takeaway is there's no special driver for Astra needed. It's just the Cassandra driver. And then we will establish a session, right? So this handles all the communication with the cluster, and we really encourage you to have just one session per application, and also good housekeeping. We want to shut down the session when we're done, right? So that we don't need to keep any TCP sockets open, etc. So it's it's just good practice. And again, this is fairly simple. We just shut it down, and then we're done with it. Good. So let's get Gitpod ready. If you haven't worked with Gitpod, I think it's really wonderful. It's I recommend it to everybody. I love it. Next week, actually, when we do our workshop about reactive Spring, I think Cedric will be joined by the founder of Gitpod in the presentation. So if you like this tool and have any questions, you might just come along for the ride in case to learn something new. Good. So we will get started and get this connection ready. So I show you just one thing here is that we will need to get the secure bundle from Astra. We find that on the Astra connection page, and I'll show you in a moment. And you will need to copy the link address and then curl it into Gitpod. That's the easiest way. You can also download it and then upload it again into Gitpod, but it's much easier to do with the curl command. Okay, let's show you that. So in our summary of our database, right? So you see here.
So, Bettina, just there's one nice question here from Krishna. How do you create tables using Python? You can make schema changes. So whether you're creating new tables, or you're creating new key spaces, or making changes to like you can alter the schema of existing tables and that sort of stuff through the drivers, whether it's Python or the Java driver or Node.js, you can do that. But we recommend that you don't make schema changes programmatically, just because it's easy to get into a schema disagreement. Just remember that when you're dealing with Cassandra, it's a distributed architecture, so you're not making a change on a single node. That change needs to get propagated to all the nodes, and it's usually easy to make a mistake. Is most developers think that, hey, if I make a change, it should magically happen on all nodes. But the reality is, there's network latency. You can't beat physics. You can't beat the speed of light. It's just the way it is. So it's preferable if you do that, manually via CQLSH. At least you have better control over it.
Absolutely. So Eric and I have both worked in support, and we've, if you get into a state that you have a schema disagreement in your cluster, it can be really painful to resolve. So, from that experience, I always say, do not make the schema changes to the driver. It is very tempting, right? Because you're basically just executing statements, right? These are just SQL statements, and you're just executing them, and the driver gives you all the ability to do that. But yeah, I think I encourage you then to work closely with your administrator to make sure that you can do those changes through the console rather than programmatically. It's not worth the effort. Cool. So let's get going here. I wanted to show you how to get to the secure bundle, right? So this is the connection. This is the summary page. And then here, if you click on connect, you get to the connection choices. So you can have different connection methods. You can have a REST API or a GraphQL API. We're not doing this today. We just go to the driver side here, right? And then we want to download the secure bundle. And I don't want to save a copy now on my local machine and upload it into the Git pod. Instead, I just copy the link address here into my clipboard, and then I go into my Git pod. I haven't shown you how to start Git pod. I think probably should have shown you that first. And then I go through this again. So Git pod. If you're on the GitHub repo, at this stage, step 2, set up IDE, right? There's a button for Git pod, and you can just right-click on it and open it in a new tab, and that will create a new workspace for you. So if I do that here, for example, and I show you, it's sort of like this is what you would see, and I think it might actually say that I already have one because I will just stop doing this but this is what you would see, and then you end up getting to let's reset it. Let's see that.
So just while you're doing that, Bettina, so just those who are not familiar with Git pod, as it says there, it's an IDE that's like Eclipse, integrated development environment. The whole idea, the reason we use Git pod a lot for workshops is that we don't have to troubleshoot problems on your laptop. Say for example, you've got a problem on your Windows laptop, you get stuck during the workshop. We don't have to deal with that because everything is happening just on a web browser.
Yeah, I might have just messed this up a little bit by switching these different workspaces because it's taking a lot of time to sort of get out of the sleeping mode. I think I'll just I'll create a new one because I did also make a commit earlier to the repo and create a fresh workspace. Let's do that here. And now I just did this, what I wanted to avoid. I just click the button and it just replaces the GitHub repo with the Git pod, but that's fine. And I might have to change my background. I've messed this all up a bit. I'll just do that in a moment. Come on, how's it going for everybody else? I hope you're not stuck at this place here. Do you think so?
So very good point from Craig. So on YouTube chat that the the link to the secure bundle. So you're not actually downloading the secure bundle. You're just getting the link from Astra, and then we're going to use that in Gitpod. But as Craig points out, that link, that secure link, has a very short lifetime. It's less than 5 minutes, I think. So it will expire. So if you haven't used it, you have to regenerate it again. You have to go back again to Astra and copy the link again.
Yeah, I hope you're having better luck with Gitpod than I do today. I just messed it up a little bit, I think. It's give it a bit of time. But it's doing something, it's progressing, isn't it? It's just a bit slow. This one is fine. This one is fine. Okay, cool. So I make it bigger now. So perfect. Okay, so I hope you're all good with getting Gitpod up and running. So let's do exactly what Eric just said. This has probably taken a couple of minutes. So I want to refresh this. I want to reload this page here because I want to get a fresh link. And it's not straightforward that you have a stale link. So I want to copy this link address. And now I want to curl this into, and you need to make sure that you have it in the, actually let me just change into the Python directory first, because this is how I set it up with Python. So now I want to curl this link, right? And you need to wrap the link in double quotes. So paste this link in. You see it's not a nice link. It's very long. And then I want to save that into creds.zip, right? And if you don't put it into the double quotes, it still seems to work, but it doesn't. So it's so you don't get a proper exception, but you need to really wrap it into the double quotes. So this is what you want to see. You want to see that you've received about 12 kilobytes. So if you have less than that, then your link is not complete and is missing some kind of JSON file, and you will not be able to connect. And this happens if the link has expired. And so it's just something to watch out for. This looks successful. And then what we have in here, we have the creds in there, right? So this is what you want to do. Ideally, you want to have it really in your CRUD Python, because this is, otherwise you have to change some path. But again, it's not a huge effort to do that. It doesn't have to be in a specific place. You just need to know where it is. And okay, so I hope you're there. I'm sorry that it took a little bit longer to get this set up. And then we can look into the Python code. And you know, the Node.js directory is exactly the same, has exactly the same kind of exercises, but we just stay with the Python for now. And we look into the DB connection setup here. So this is where we want to set up. Okay, so this is where we define our database details. Yeah, so this is so secure connect bundle. So this is the path that needs to match where you are. In this case, you see the creds is here in the workspace, workshop with CRUD Python and Node, CRUD Python, and we set it up exactly for that, right? So this is basically a root here in Gitpod, and this is the additional directory we have in there, and this is where we called the creds in. And then you also want to have the right username and the right password and your key space. And we're giving all that to the connection. So here we say, you know, we use the cloud connection method with the secure bundle, and use that we defined here, the secure bundle, and we give it the username and the password. And you see here, when we later call on that connection object we call close, then it actually shuts it down properly, shuts down the session as we advise, right? So this is the important shutdown as well that we want you to do when we clean it up. And then to test it, we're just going to start this exercise. We just, we just run it out. We just read something from system local, for example, to try it out whether it's actually working, and connection close. So let's do that. So let me just clear this out so it's not behind me here. Then go it up and run the first exercise, which is exercise 2, connect to Cassandra. Oops. Oh, I didn't install the driver. Silly me. Okay, let's do this. Pip install Cassandra driver. Very first. Pip install Cassandra driver. First step. Download the driver. Okay, and let's do this again. Run the exercise. Yeah, okay. Exercise. You're now connected to the cluster, CAS cluster. In case anybody wondered, I set up a different cluster. I set it up as my Astra cluster, but this is basically the Cassandra as a service cluster where this is running, and under the hood, my new cluster is implemented into this much larger Cassandra as a service cluster. So that's successful. And I hope everybody's seeing that. What's the feedback, Eric?
Just helping a few people with getting their bundles downloaded onto GitHub.
Yeah, this is the only, we're actually working on making this easier, right? So, but this is the real crucial thing, right? Your code needs to have access to that bundle in order to be able to connect, right? So you want to make sure it's in the right place and you have it completely right with the bundle. I check whether there's any questions coming into the Slido. No, nothing. Okay. Let me know when it's okay to move on. And
yeah, I think we're good unless anyone else is stuck. Yep, they're good now.
Good, excellent. Right, so now we're just going to create and update records, and there's a couple of things, different things we can do and try out. So we go through all of them. First of all, we can always execute very simple statements. This is we basically just put the SQL code in there, right? In this case, we are just parameterizing a little bit here where we have this placeholder. And something that you notice here, this is actually a string placeholder, right? But we're putting an integer in there. We are really composing a string, right? We're composing a query string that we're giving to the driver, and it executes it with session.execute. So that's something that you want to just bear in mind. It has to be an S. The simple statements are the simplest form of doing this. And as I said earlier, and as Eric said, you can actually put your schema creation statements just in here, right? So create table, blah, 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 because these are SQL statements and the driver would just execute it. But again, we don't recommend that you do that. But obviously for development, you can just try it out. That's fine. The better way of doing simple statements is to use prepared statements. So we basically prepare them once and compile them once, and the node, the client side actually knows about those statements. This is a much better way of executing them. It's faster and it's safer, right? So because here you kind of basically vulnerable to injection attacks because you just basically insert something in there, versus with the prepared statements, you're basically creating a template to be used, and then you bind your values to the prepared statement. So you prepare it first, and then you're telling it to use the prepared statement. This is using a special object, right, as a prepared statement, and then you basically telling it to use it with the bound value. So that is definitely the way to go, especially if you have a lot of inserts of the same kind. But if you think about our telemetry use case, where we're inserting the speed again and again and again and again, and the only thing that's really changing is the value that we're inserting. So it makes total sense to use a template, and Cassandra would actually flag that up. If you have because it caches the statements as well, so it would flag that up if you every time create a new prepared statement, for example. So we really want to reuse the templates that we're setting up. So we're trying this out now. So we're doing exercise 3 and 4 to exercise simple statements and prepared statements. You had a question, Eric?
Oh, no, I was just going to say about the prepared statements. So they're an optimization, meaning that the statement that you're sending to the server from your driver, from your application, doesn't need to get parsed and processed server side. So you're just sending really the bound value to the server plus the ID of the cached prepared statement, so you don't have this constant round trip of stuff happening.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Eric. You're so good. Yeah, exactly. It's an optimization that makes it faster. It makes it safer. It's really the recommended way of doing that. But we'll show you both things today. So let's try that out. Cool. So I think I'll show you in the README a little bit. Let me just go to the preview here. There we go there. So if you go to exercise with Python, so you should see here in the README after all the driver stuff. Let's see where we are. We installed it. We ran the first. This is exercise 3, right? So there's a couple of things that would make sense to explore in the code. For example, how to recreate a journey ID. And I'll show you that in a moment. Obviously, to run it, just run it with Python, and then this is the expected output. So let's have a look a little bit at this code. So as I said, when I motivated the data model, is that we want to have the ability to save the spacecraft name and also a unique identifier for the journey. And ideally, you would create a new one, right? So we're just using this here. You could create it with UUID.UUID1 that creates you a type 1, a time UUID. But in this case, we've hard-coded it, right? So in order to be able to, easily get back, because otherwise I would have to copy this new value and put it into the next exercise code. But really, if you want to create your next journey after this exercise today, or additional journeys, you want to make sure that you always use a new one, right? So that you have them uniquely identifiable, these different journeys, if it is for the same spacecraft. Right, so we're putting our spacecraft name in there, and then here we're just using the simple statement, right? So this is here, we just put connection session.execute and just put the statement in here, and then we bind these 4 values, right? So, and again, we're using the string placeholder here, and we're just completing the string here. So this is not using a prepared statement. And now we put those, the spacecraft name, journey ID, the Boolean value, and our summary in there, and we just send it to the driver. Let's do that. So let's run it here. Number 3, we are creating our journey. It says journey created, success. Let's have a quick look at our database. So we go back into the Sql Console. And we use the spacecraft key space. And now let's see what we have in the journey. Select all from the spacecraft. Oops. What happened? Oh, sorry. Select all from spacecraft journey catalog. And there we are. This is what I just inserted, right? And you see, I didn't insert all the values that I could have. I could have inserted something for end and for start, and they're just not in the database. So we see this here as a null denoted because we don't have a value in there. However, we didn't actually insert a null, right? We just left it blank, right? And this is how this gets displayed back to us. Inserting a null into the database is something very different and not recommended because it basically creates a placeholder for no data in there. So you're basically filling up your database with nulls. Okay, so that was successful. So, and let's go to the next exercise where we are looking at using prepared statements. So in this case, we're going to update this journey because we're now taking off. So we're setting a start time and we're setting the value to active, right? So here we're currently not active here. And now we're going to set the value to active. So we are on our way and we have a start time. And so we're doing this here by creating this update query first. Update query, so update spacecraft journey catalog, set active to true, start. And you see here now the placeholder is different, right? Before we were using the string placeholder in order to complete the string. But when we create a prepared statement, we have a different placeholder here, right? And this is basically how that the logic works for the prepared statements. So we're using a question mark here. And we're telling it explicitly that this is basically a prepared statement. So we're preparing it here, prepare the update, connection session, prepare, use that update query as a prepared statement. And then we're binding those values and they will now go into those question mark values of this template, right? So this is we're setting the time, we're setting the spacecraft name, and we're setting the journey ID. And the reason why we're setting the spacecraft name and the journey ID here is because we need to uniquely identify the record that we're actually updating. And remember the primary key of the spacecraft journey catalog that had the spacecraft name for the partition and the journey ID for the uniqueness. So we need to specify both of them in the primary key in order to update this record successfully. But we're really only setting a couple of items. We're setting true, which we've hard-coded there, and we're setting the start time, which we're passing here as a value. Okay, so let's do that. Let's run this. And we do Python 4, take off.
Make sure you put your seatbelts on, by the way, before we take off.
Exactly. You see this nice little animation, ignition? Sophisticated. So it's taken off. There you go. And let's have a look at this now. It's been updated. You see, we have set to true now, and we have started the journey today, 8th of October. It's actually 9:15 in the UK. This is UCT, and brings the astronauts to ISS. Good. Everybody got that? So, do you have any feedback? It's really hard if I can't see the chat. So,
yeah, no, I think we're going okay.
Okay, good. It's not. It's actually not that really hard. I hope you're finding it easy now that the connection is sorted out. Right. Okay. So the next one is a little bit more interesting. This is the most interesting code. Is in the exercise 5, and I've got a few slides about that. So exercise 5 introduces a couple of slightly more advanced and interesting concepts. But again, as in the warning that you said earlier, simply because it's more advanced and more interesting doesn't mean that you should use it all the time, right? So we want you to know and we want you to be able to use those concepts, but you probably don't want to use them all the time. This is working with batches, right? So in this case, we're creating, batch inserts, meaning that we want them to be executed at the same time, right? So we're grouping them together and we're sending them all together to the database, and we want them to be all executed at the same time in one go, right? And it's something that you might want to, Cassandra is a denormalized database, right? And, you might have, you might need to duplicate your data into several tables at the same time. Basically, you want to have a table that has tasks by user and the task itself, and then perhaps some other tables, monthly tasks or daily tasks, and they all want to have a record in there in order to complete this view that you want to get out for a single query. So in this case, this is a very, very simple example, but we have we want to update 4 tables at the same time for the same timestamp, basically, that we've created with our different telemetry readings, right? So batches are really convenient for that. Batches are not to be confused with bulk loading, right? So this is not for bulk loading. This is really for this one, more, atomic unit that we want to set at the same time on all these different tables.
And that's a very, very good point, because for people that come from a relational background, they think, oh, batch, it's it's an optimization. It isn't. It's not an optimization in Cassandra. We probably, in hindsight, we probably should have called it like atomic statements, because it makes all those inserts or updates or deletes within that batch one atomic operation.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly why I bring it up, because both Eric and I have seen these confusions, right, in the questions that you're dealing with that you, for example, get on community.datastacks.com, right? So it's worth really telling you how this works, but it's also worth telling you that there can also be fraud with problems, right? Basically, you're binding lots of different updates together, for example. And if you think about a distributed database, you might bind statements here together that need to go to different nodes, and they need to go to different partitions. So you might put a lot of effort onto the coordinator node in your database cluster that actually handles the assembly of all these different queries. So that coordinator node has to wait for all these things to come back in order to mark the query or the batch statement as completed. And if you fan out a very large batch to a lot of different partitions and nodes on the cluster, this can actually really severely impact the performance. So it's good that you know about it. Most people really want to do it at first, right? Because especially when you get introduced to the concept of denormalization, it's good to know how to do it. But actually, personally, I think it's better to think about a data model and how you want to write and read your data that doesn't really need the batches, right? I think think about it as an advanced concept and treat it a little bit with respect, and think about how the database needs to handle these kind of requests and serve them. There's a lot of information online on these things, a lot of discussion, right? A lot of discussion, because it really depends very much on the size of your cluster and the size of your, the kind of data that you want to read out. There's a lot of depends in this kind of considerations, but just be aware, that it's a powerful tool, but it comes great responsibility with this power. Would you agree, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And the other one is the working with the UDTs, right? And while the drivers are all very, very, very similar in terms of functionality, some of the things they handle quite differently. And I found that especially the working with UDTs for Python is a little bit different than, for example, with Node. With Node, you're basically just passing an object. That's fine. With UDTs in Python, the recommended way is actually to register the UDTs with the cluster instance, and it's a little bit more complex to set this up. But when you're using prepared statements, you do not need to register this. And this is what we're doing today, right? So we need to create a class that has the UDT in there. And as long as we're using a prepared statement, we can just pass the class instance to the statement, to the driver, and it's fine. It's really to keep the knowledge of the schema and it's synchronized with the driver. This is what this registration is about, right? We don't need to use this, but you can put a link into the README in order they can read up more. And you will find that with quite a few things in the drivers, there's often a simple way of doing it, and a more advanced and probably a better way of doing this. And both the batches and the UDTs kind of fall into this category. So for the batches, we have the Python object mapper, and you can have a different way of working with the data and the batches there. We're not exploring this today, but in the driver documentation, you have a lot of examples. For Node, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm just why I called it a Python special, because I remember when I got started with that, it tripped me up a little bit, and I thought I'd save you that pain. Okay, so but then we can get started and insert the UDTs in the batches with our exercise 5. And as I said, it's the most advanced of our exercises. So let's have a quick look here. So basically now we're inserting our telemetry data, right? So, and we insert them all, at the same time. That's why we decide to be updating 4 tables, right? We're inserting them all at the same time. And we're preparing 4 statements here. So we have the insert speed. This is just the standard, SQL statement that we're preparing here with the placeholder values. Insert temperature, pressure, and location. And we are populating the entire primary key, right? So we've got a spacecraft name and a journey ID as part of the partition. And then we have the reading itself, like the speed, the temperature, etc. And the reading time was the time of the primary key, right? That allows us to sort it by the most recent time, for example, or in chronological order. So this is pretty straightforward. Here is the class for the location object that we, for our UDT, where we set the X, Y, and Z coordinate, and we will be referring back to this. And then we're running a big loop here, right? So it's set it to 1,000 iterations here, and here in the loop we just randomly generate some kind of numbers, right, in order to sort of simulate some telemetry, sleeping a little bit in order to simulate the traveling. But here's the interesting bit where we are creating this batch, right? We're using an object here, the batch statement, and we are adding to this, right? We're adding each batch to it, each statement into this batch, and then we're executing the batch altogether. That's really it. And here we're passing the UDT instance that we created. We're passing that here, and we basically compose them out of the X, Y, and Z. Make sense? Good. So the reason why I went for 1,000, because later on, when we want to read out the information, we want to actually have quite a lot of data in there in order to page through it and do something a little bit more interesting with it. It just will take a little bit more time to write it into the database. So let's do this here. So Python X5 and get traveling. There we are. So in the meantime, we can have a look what's happening in Cassandra. So have a look at, for example, we can look at the speed, right, of the time. And there we are. We've got lots of data here, right? So already more than it's useful for us. You can control C out of that. And I think this shows later on why we want to page through this information. We do not want to get all the data at once. And actually, if you have 100,000 records in your table, you do not want to do the select star, right, to get everything. You probably want to do something like this. If you are in the console, you can do a limit 10, for example, and it just gives you the first 10 rows, right?
Yeah, so since you mentioned that, Bettina, so probably a good spot to discuss it now. So even in the code examples, we have a lot of select star when we're trying to read from the tables. The best practice is really not to use the select star. So let's say you've got a table that has a table of users that they have like a first name, a family name, and an email address. At some point in the future, if you change the structure, the schema of the table, and say you added another column, say, I don't know, the user's favorite color. If you keep using select star in your application, at some point, if you execute a prepared statement and you try to read the older data, it won't have the favorite color of the user, the one that you added, say, a month ago. And so you'll get an error when you read that because, say, for example, it's expecting, say, a phone number or a date type in the column, but it got a text back instead because when you alter the schema of the table, the columns are now out of sequence. It's no longer in the sequence that the prepared statement expects it to be. So I know we in the code examples that we provided you, there's a lot of select star in there, but really for best practice, you need to explicitly select every single column. So select first name, last name, email address, whatever it is from your table. That's for best practice.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you made that point. And it's just typical when you demonstrate something and you don't have a lot of data and you don't have, changes to the data or the schema over time. It's so easy to just do the select stars, right? And we are guilty. We're so guilty of that. We have that in all of our examples.
And that's not a Cassandra thing, right? That's a best practice for any database application. And there's a really good question about batches as well, Bettina, that I wanted to quickly cover. So the question from Reese was on YouTube is, is it possible that 1 out of 4 statements fail? In that case, will everything roll back and no statement executed? Or will 3 of the 4 execute and 1 of the 4 fail? It's not so, there is no rollback with batch statements. So the way batch statements work is that before all the statements in the batch are applied, meaning before they get executed, the statements get written to a batch log on 2 completely different nodes. They're fairly random nodes that get picked, right? And so when the write to the batch log to 2 different nodes is successful, then Cassandra will apply all the statements within the batch. So it's a all or none proposition for batch statements. Either all of the statements in the batch are successful or none of them will get applied. And the only time that they will not get applied is if there was a failure when the batch log before, that I was explaining before, if the batch log doesn't get written to 2 random nodes successfully, meaning that it's persisted to disk successfully, then Cassandra will not execute the batch at all, meaning that none of the statements in that batch get applied. So those are the 2 differences. That's what makes batch statements atomic, meaning that everything in it will get executed guaranteed or none. Yeah, exactly as Craig said, it's a 2-phase commit. Exactly that.
Thank you. That's awesome. Mm-hmm.
And just really quickly, without going too much into the technical details, so those 2 batch logs, the batch log gets written on 2 nodes, and then Cassandra starts executing the batch statement. So as Reese used in this example, there's 4, right? Let's say the 3rd one of the 4 failed for whatever reason. That's okay, because what happens is the batch log that got written on the 2 nodes, those 2 nodes will start replaying that batch log. But let's say, and so which means that all the statements within the batch will eventually get executed. But let's say all the 4 statements got executed successfully. The thing that Cassandra does after that is it deletes the batch log entries from those 2 random nodes. So then those 2 nodes don't have to replay them. That's how the batch statements work. That's how it gets guaranteed.
I'm so glad Eric is here. Thank you so much. I could never.
I'll write a blog post about it.
That's brilliant. Are there any other questions? Anything? How is it going generally with the coding along?
Yeah, I think everyone's okay for now.
Good. That's good. I noticed here, this is, I noticed that the SQL console seems to be resetting every couple of seconds. And then every time you go in there, you want to, not every couple of seconds, probably minutes, right? You want to use that key space again in order to just a side note. This is a very recent UI change, so I'm still exploring that. So I just discovered that. Good. Okay, so I think the rest, we want to complete our journey, right? So because currently it is marked as active and ongoing. So we can see here, again, I'm doing this. Actually, I should probably select from, I'm going to be very specific now and select with the spacecraft name and the UUID in order to get that journey. So I can go to the spacecraft journey catalog, and I'm saying, you know, where my spacecraft name. So now I need to make sure that I have the, oh, I don't remember the layout. I probably don't do it. I just select it all here. Spacecraft name, that's what I didn't remember. Yeah, so these are the highlighted things here, right? These are key elements, right? This means this is the partition key and this is the clustering key. So if you wanted to just look up just one row, you would want to be very specific. Just select star from spacecraft journey catalog where the spacecraft name matches this partition key and the journey ID matches this time UUID, and then you get just this one row. In this case, we only have one row anyway in this entire catalog because we've only created one journey so far. And so far it's still active and it has no end timestamp. So we're fixing that now with just a very simple update statement. So this is exercise 6 and we're just completing it here. There's nothing special about it. It uses the simple statement again. And again, because it's a simple statement, we have the string placeholder here and we're just passing it to the, so we're just doing this now. Just put this up a bit and just to be finished with our journey. So we were landing and then we should see this here updated. Now it is no longer active, it's false. And we also have an end date now. So, you know, if you wanted to do something with this data and analyze it and complete, you know, render it on the screen, then we have all the data there. If you want to render these things on the screen, we have complete UI example for this as well. So, and we covered that actually in the summer. We built an entire app, which we then also rolled out into Docker and Kubernetes. So if you're interested in putting the UI on top of this that reads these readings, then you can check out our DataStax examples and we can put the links also into the chats, right? So we have quite a few workshops dedicated to that as well. If you want to watch the recordings and just go back to that. It has quite a few problems, especially with CORS, cross-scripting, but it's, you know, if you want to look into the React code for the UI, it might be a nice starting point as well to take this app, what we're doing today, a little bit further. Okay, so the only thing that's left now, and I don't think I have a lot more in the presentation actually, is just to read results. And I thought it was much easier to just look straight into the code, how we do simple select.
Just really quickly on that screen, Bettina, because this comes up a fair bit too. So if you go back to the Sql console.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the start and end times on the screen. So if you think back to where we had the table schema, the start and end times are of type timestamps. And timestamps, by definition, are really long integers, right? So they're the number of milliseconds since Unix epoch.
Yeah.
When you look at them via CQLSH, the CQLSH user interface automatically converts it into UTC so that it's in a human readable format. But in fact, that's not what is stored in Cassandra. So just because that comes up, a lot of people get confused. They're like, "Oh, it's meant to be a timestamp. How come I'm getting this random date?"
Very good point. Yeah, and also it stores it. It displays it as a different position than it's stored in. So this displays it here in nanoseconds position. Or is it? No, it's microsecond, and this is actually milliseconds. What we have here, right? So
Right.
I think
The plus
that's
000
something.
at the very end is the time zone, which is UTC.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, dates. Dates personally, especially when I work with Java, you know, or Scala, dates are just another really kettle of, so this kettle of fish, you know. So I think this is, I always have to go back to the documentation in order to really check out what the right insert format is, etc. And so, you know, so I think you double check if you run into these problems with timestamps, etc. Just double check the documentation, because it's just different from every language how it handles this and the rendering format, etc. So there's so much variation there. So I think timestamps are a little bit tricky to work with, I think. Good point, Eric. I think it's really worth pointing that out. So thank you. Cool. Good. So let's go and just complete our exercises. So there isn't much in the slides about that because we really just want to look into the code here. So the first exercise, this is exercise 7, where we are basically doing just what we did in our in the CRUD console. We're a little bit more specific here, right? So we are selecting the entire partition, right? We are selecting just the partition, not the unique journey, but the entire partition. So we find every journey that this spacecraft has done, right? And remember, the partition key was the spacecraft name, and the journey ID was the uniquely identifying the row within that partition. So this pulls out the entire partition. And we're just, so we're just exercising this like this. List all the journeys that this one has done. And in this case, it's only one. So if we added another one here, so we could, you know, insert into spacecraft journey catalog. And then we do the values, spacecraft name. And we do a journey ID. And then we insert values, and then we do the same value in single quotes. Just use this one here for the spacecraft name. And now we can just create a time UUID. Is it like this? And that will just create another journey for us. Oh no, I shouldn't do this before. It is every time. I come back to you in a moment. Oh, Eric, do you know what the CQL is for the time UUID?
You can just do now.
Oh, no, perfect. Of course. Yeah. Oh gosh, Eric is rescuing me again. So this is a server-side function that basically creates the time UUID for you. And now if I do my select star from this table, I have in the same partition now, I have 2 records, right? So I didn't insert anything else, right? Because, you know, I was lazy. But if I go to my code now, I can, if I run it again, now I have for the same partition. So that's what I wanted to show you, because we only specify the partition key in our statement here, right? You just pull me everything for spacecraft name. It gives me the whole partition, not just the unique journey, right? If I want to just get the unique row, I also would need to specify the journey ID, right? This is this UUID. And, you know, so this is what I meant. We have some tools available that create these UUIDs for you. So you do not have to create them explicitly. So you can do it server side. In our case, we're actually creating these things always on the client side using actually just the UUID plugin for Python, but you could also have the UUID tools that come with the driver. Okay, makes sense? So this is just a simple lookup of the entire partition. If you want to be more specific, right, we can look up the journey details, right? This is what we're doing in exercise 8. And in this case, again, it's just another simple statement here. And this time we're passing the spacecraft name and a journey ID. And we're also passing the output a little bit here, right? So the result set that we get back, the results that we're getting back from the driver, from the select statement, is a result set. And in the result set, we actually can, it's almost like a dictionary. We can now specifically specify the journey ID and the spacecraft name. These are the columns, right, that we have from the database, right? And we can specifically call them out here, right? In this case, we use everything. We use the journey ID and the spacecraft name, the summary, active stat, and in order to show that. So if you run that, so Python, it's number 8, so 8. And it's bringing this back. And in this case, it's not showing us both journeys, right? Because we're very specific. We told it use this UUID, and we're only using this specific record. Okay. And then in the last, not entirely the last one, but here, this is where we want to look at the meter readings, right? So this is, for example, select for spacecraft speed. We're going to read the speed over time, and we need to give it again the spacecraft name and a journey ID because this was very specific. And now we're pulling out again the full partition for this one, right? So we had organized our partition key to be spacecraft name and journey ID. So we're pulling out the entire partition, and we updated 1,000 records into this. So this will actually be quite a few records. Actually, let me set this here to 1 because that looks a bit nicer on the screen. And just this. If you make any changes in Gitpod, make sure that you save it. It doesn't auto-save. And then let's do Python, and that's number 9. Start the exercise. There you go. So what we're doing here is basically we're setting here a counter, basically a row counter here, and then we are passing this in here. So we have the ID, and then we're giving the state of the loop here of the counter, and then we're putting that out here. The data, so the row reading time, and then the row speed, and then we're incrementing this row counter, and we're printing it out. There you go. And this is what I meant. This is obviously doesn't make a lot of sense if you have 1,000 records, right? Because it doesn't make sense to pull out 1,000 records if you can't sort of like see them at once, right? That's my opinion. So yeah, no, I would think you want a page, right? And this is what we do with the last exercise here. So this is the last exercise 10. So we have here, again, we're selecting specifically the UID and the spacecraft name. And now we're actually in our simple statements, we're setting a fetch size. So you see here, we're passing something in addition, we're passing the query, and we're passing a query option here, right? And we're telling you only fetch 10 records for me. And then in our result set, right, we're getting here the different results, right, that we want to get out, but we're also getting a paging state out. Let me just see exactly where that is. So we're setting here the statement, we're passing the values, right? We've set the fetch size on the statement, and then we're printing it. We're printing the state, the paging state. It's sort of like a hidden value that we're getting in our result set, right? We're getting the result set here, and then here we're pulling out the paging state, and we're printing that out just to show you what it looks like. It's kind of like a pointer, it's a bookmark where we are in our paging. And then when we create the second page, right, we're passing that into our execute statement as an additional option. So we're telling you, do the statement with the fetch size 10, bind these values, and start at this paging state, right, that we've saved from before. and go to the next page, and then show us the second page. So we do that here. We can make it a little bit smaller, actually, the fetch size, so it fits better onto the screen. And I do Python 10. There you go.
By the way, the default for the drivers is 5,000.
Exactly, 5,000. Doesn't give me anything. So now I get the first 5, and this is the paging state, right? We fill it out because it's really interesting what it looks like, but so it doesn't make much sense to me. But the driver understands it, and now it goes and fetches the next 5, right? And we're only displaying 2 pages, so that's all we needed for this one. But of course, go ahead and experiment with that, because I think that's really powerful and that's really interesting. So, and that's how you really ideally deal with larger data sets. You do not want to pull everything out in one go. Okay, and that was basically it, right? So we created records, we updated records, we read records. We're actually not deleting any records here, but it would be the same. You just put the delete statement into your driver. You can use it both as a simple statement and as a prepared statement. The deletes in Cassandra are basically updates again. We're basically overwriting that record, that row with a marker that this is now considered deleted, but it just is just another update. Good.
In fact, everything in Cassandra is an insert under the hood. So the insert, the update, the delete statements, all those 3 statements are all inserting under the hood.
Good. Okay, so I hope we haven't lost too many people on the way. So, and we can go to Menti. And now, if you...
We're ready to win some prizes?
Register to, yeah. So I don't know how many people we have on it now. So let's have a look, see whether it samples. Go back to Menti. We're going to have 5 questions. Fastest fingers. The first 3 on the leaderboard will win prizes. So see whether you can get in. Give us thumbs up when you're in Menti. And then wait for the leaderboard to assemble, the players. Oh, I've got quite a few. Cool. How many should I wait for? Do you think we've got 15? Do you think that's representative of everybody who's playing along, Eric?
Yep.
16. Quick, get in there. You have a really good chance today at winning something. Okay, perfect. Let's start. Right. So look at your screen. Don't look at the YouTube chat. So what does UDT stand for? Look at your phone. Is it a user-defined type? Is it understandable text? Unrecoverable data type? Unrecognizable data type? What is it? Yay! Almost everybody got it right. So perfect. Watch out, Eric is playing along sometimes, so he wants to get onto the top there. So.
I've only made the leaderboard once, and I know the questions and the answers too.
Yeah, I'm never fast enough. So. Okay, Bell. Fast. Oh, that's nice. The rose is on top. Fastest. Very good. Heartstorm. That sounds interesting. And we have a frog with 7348058. Well done. Okay, next one. Question 2. Look at your phone. What do we use to close the session? Shut up, shut down, close, finish. Let's see who gets that right. It's a slightly trickier question. Oh, no! Oh, I know it's slightly trickier. It's really the session, right? We close the session with shut down, right? We close I think I go back and show you in the code here. So in the you know, where we set up the connection here, right? Here is where we're closing the session, we're shutting it down. But we're defining the method here, close, and that's what we're using in our code. You know, I really admit that this is tripping people up, right? Using connection.close, but the session itself is shut down, right? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. So, but anyway, this was only the second question. You still have chances to really catch up and make good. So I apologize. Oh, Megana, you've changed your name. Okay, so that's okay. All right then. So you can still catch up if you got that wrong. So like be really fast on the next question. So let's see what you have here.
You gotta do better, Craig.
Where to get the secure bundle from Astra, right? You buy it from DataStax. It's included with the driver already. You zip up all the connection files. You download it from the connections page. Everybody should get that right? So we spend so much time with the connection bundle. So where do you get the secure bundle from Astra? Perfect. Yeah, so you download from the connections bundle. You know, truthfully, this is just connection credentials, sort of like zip tab, but you don't have to do it yourself. It's all handled for you. So, and so you download it from the connections page. Well done. Let's see what is done to our leaderboard. You can totally blame me for these questions. So I think I have a tendency of perhaps making them a little bit too confusing. But come back next week. You know, we run Menti in every workshop. So there should be lots of chances of winning some prizes. Next one, we have, what driver is needed to connect to Astra? A Spacecraft Astra node, a dedicated Astra driver, a DataStax Cassandra driver, a SQL client. Well done. Very good. Okay. Yeah, so definitely not this one, of course. Yeah, so the point I wanted to make is you do not need to have a dedicated driver. And for Astra, so it's, you know, any DataStax Cassandra driver of later versions is enabled for that. A SQL client would also use the driver underneath, right, in order to connect. So, and what has this done to our leaderboard? We've got Cedric is playing along. Cedric, you made it to the leaderboard. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Well, I think there is still a lot of room, you know, for some movement here. So, like, it's gonna be to see who wins the third place. So that's our last question. What statements do we use to read database records? Do we read from a table, select from a table, load from a table, or understand from a table? Let's see. Perfect. Absolutely correct. Yeah. So we just select from a table. I think this is fairly standard for anybody who's used SQL. Perfect. So let's see who our winners are today. We've got, oh, we've got it almost, we have got it back, I think, to where we were in the beginning. Almost, I think perhaps a little bit swapped. Well done, Heartstorm, Megana, and 7348058. Thank you very much for playing along. Identify yourself to our helpers in the chats, and we need to make sure that we get your full details so we can actually send you the swag. Thank you very much for playing along. That was good fun. Stay on the Menti for a moment, and we want to ask you a few questions what we should do better. This is freeform, and I leave that up for a while, so you can just put your own comments in there and let us know what you want to see better, what we, you know, what else we could offer, etc.
So just really quickly, so Heartstorm, Megana, and 7348058. Can you email Cedric Lundin, please? Cedric.lundin@datastacks.com.
I love this feedback. It's so nice. Yeah, so said Eric, I'm sure you've put all the details into the chats as well. Eric is very good at doing that. So put it into the chats to make sure that we catch you and we can get you this back. It's pretty nice things that we sent out, and we get some great feedback from those people who got it. So I leave that open so you can put some additional things in there. It's always good to get the feedback, and also just don't hold back if you think we can do things better. Let me show you a few additional things. We really want to hear what you're doing, right? You're really, really interested in what you're doing, and tell us, if you've made something, if you've built an app, etc. And actually, we wanted to give you a free voucher, didn't we? So I think I show you here the voucher form that I think Eric is probably putting that into the chat right now. And that's a perfect way of showing off your repos and your work. And it also, you earn a voucher to take a free certification exam if you want to get certified for Cassandra. So that's giving you sort of like $140 saving with the voucher over the exam cost. To claim this, right, of course, you need your email address. Let us also know if it's a different one, what you use to register with Astra. But this is the important bit here, and I make that a bit bigger here. Show us a little bit what you're doing, right? So provide some kind of GitHub repo that shows your experimentation and perhaps also your struggles or successes. We want to celebrate those things with you and provide your GitHub URL in here and to qualify. So that's one thing. But even if you don't want a voucher, we want to hear what you're doing, right? So we're very open. Let us know. You can find us on Discord. You can find us on community.datastacks.com. And we definitely want to hear about your work with Astra and how you're getting started with this technology. Good. And then apart from that, there is quite a lot of additional resources that has a ton of online examples now with Katacoda. So, they can be very specific. For example, if you want to do something with Astra or with GraphQL, so you will find examples there. They all work very similar. They spin up nodes for you, and you can sort of like make it easy for you to exercise the commands. Very good, nice learning tools. So you can go in there and try it out for different languages and different kind of scenarios. Eric and I work a lot on community, but there's also a lot of other people within DataStax and the wider Cassandra community who answer questions there for you. So bring your questions, let other people know about your questions so they can all learn from your experience and from your interest. So this is up all the time. Come and help us and contribute if you have the answers as well. Follow us on YouTube and Twitter and actually Eventbrite. Right, in Eventbrite, you will see all the details about the upcoming workshops, and we're doing a lot of workshops at the moment. I think we're up to 3 or 4 per week now, and there's a lot of happening there. We get really good responses, and I hope you'll gain from those experiences. So follow us on Eventbrite, where you see what's coming up in the next few weeks, and then all the material should be on GitHub. Most of it is in DataStax Academy. There's also DataStax examples, and if it gets really cluttered, we might open up another GitHub place, for DataStax developers. But you will find the material and it stays there. Same for the videos; they're recorded, they stay on YouTube, and you have quite a large variety of recorded sessions now to review if you're interested.
Yeah, so a few people have asked questions. Yeah, a few people have been asking questions on chat or Discord. So if you're really after tutorials, we've got really nice tutorials on datastacks.com/dev. They're easy to follow tutorials, and it's similar to the way we do stuff. So the tutorials are based on kata-code scenarios, which means that you don't have anything to install. If say you're learning how to do data modeling and stuff, as part of within the browser itself, it will install a Cassandra instance for you, so you can run the commands exactly where you are. Or say if you're learning how to use the Java driver, it's exactly the same thing. There's the everything happens within that same browser. You don't have to install anything to learn stuff. So makes it really easy. It's all free, by the way, everything that we do.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I think we are really, just a little bit over now. Are there any more questions that's sort of burning? Anything that we should? I just have a last look at Slido and see whether that wasn't very used at all today. Perhaps next time. So, any other questions that are outstanding, Eric?
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Well, in this case,
thanks everyone for joining us.
For coming. Yeah.
See you in a future session. Yeah.
Come again, right? So next week, Spring and Reactive, and I think there's also a Docker series running currently on Mondays. And yeah, check out the Eventbrite and to see what's happening. Until then, take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.